Well, the regime is attempting to protect January 6 police officers who committed attacks on peaceful protesters. That's another hot one from Ms. Julie Kelly at American Greatness. After months of foot dragging, Joe Biden's Justice Department is preparing for the first set of trials related to its sprawling prosecution of January 6 defendants. Robert Geiswein, who turned himself in, was arrested on January 19th for his involvement in the Capitol protest, is scheduled to stand trial in February. A week after his arrest, Geiswein, 24 at the time, was indicted by a federal grand jury on 6 counts, including, quote, assaulting, resisting, or impeding, close quote, law enforcement with a dangerous weapon that day. He's been behind bars ever since, denied bail while Judge Emmett Sullivan delayed his trial on numerous occasions. He is among 40 or so January 6 defendants held in part of the D.C. jail system solely used to detain Capitol protesters. Federal prosecutors accuse Geiswein of using a chemical spray against police officers and carrying a baseball bat. Clad in military-style gear, he climbed through a broken window shortly after the first breach of the building. He told a reporter on the scene that the corrupt politicians who have been in office for 50 or 60 years need to be imprisoned. Democrat politicians, Geiswein complains, sold out the country to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, a remark an FBI investigator on his case described as an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Ahead of Geiswein's trial, the Justice Department asked Judge Sullivan to strictly curtail how Geiswein can defend himself. A motion filed earlier this month argued he should not use self-defense against law enforcement as a reason for his actions on January 6. Prosecutors also stated that Geiswein should not blame President Trump for his alleged criminal behavior, claiming it is objectively unreasonable to conclude that President Trump could authorize citizens to interfere with the Electoral College proceedings, close quote. A legal torpedo, Kelly says, to the Democrats' nonstop accusations that Trump incited the events of January 6th. The defendant will not be able to put forth any evidence that he had a reasonable belief that his actions were necessary to defend himself against the immediate use of unlawful force. Matthew Graves, the new U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, wrote in a December 1 filing, quote, through his words and actions, the defendant made plain his intent. The court should exclude any testimony and evidence purporting to assert a claim of self-defense, close quote. Preventing Geiswein from telling a jury exactly what happened on January 6th is the Justice Department's latest attempt to cover up police misconduct. Mr. Geiswein's alleged offenses coincided with the time frame when Capitol and D.C. Metropolitan police officers started attacking thousands of protesters assembled outside the building on January 6th. Law enforcement deployed explosive devices known as flashbangs, which emit a powerful burst of light and sound to temporarily stun the intended victim, into the crowd around 1:15 p.m. on January 6th, just moments after Mr. Trump finished up his speech at the Ellipse less than 2 miles away. Police also used rubber bullets, tear gas, batons, and in some cases, their own fists to assault the protesters. Protesters know this is fact, rather prosecutors, and it's precisely why the Justice Department is desperate to keep any video footage or testimony that portrays these vicious assaults out of the public eye. As Kelly has reported, the Justice Department and U.S. Capitol Police want roughly 14,000 hours of surveillance video captured by security cameras on January 6th to remain under protective orders. It's unbelievable. The trove is considered highly sensitive government material by Biden's Justice Department. Even defendants are strictly limited as to how they can view this classified footage used as evidence against them. Much of it would show a sustained attack on peaceful Americans by D.C.-based law enforcement agencies. But as trials get underway and long-delayed discoveries finally produced by the government, more evidence of these egregious and in several cases criminal police misconduct is emerging. And in some cases will pit cop against cop. Tom Webster, a retired 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department and decorated Marine charged with assaulting law enforcement on January 6, recently notified the court he will claim self-defense against excessive force in his April trial. Cherry-picked video released to the media by the Justice Department several months ago shows Webster screaming at a line of police officers around 2:30 p.m. on January 6. Quote, "You fucking piece of shit," Webster could be heard saying to an unidentified officer. "You fucking commie motherfuckers, man. You want to attack Americans? No. Fuck that," close quote. Now, what would compel a longtime police officer to angrily confront his brothers in blue? Here's how Webster's attorney described the scene in a June motion. For the 10 minutes prior to encountering the defendant, Officer NR, unidentified, can be seen reaching over the metal barrier and pushing a female protester holding a flag to the ground on 2 separate occasions. The protesters were by and large peaceful. It was only after tear gas and pepper spray were deployed by police upon this group of peaceful protesters that the crowds changed. Officer NR, the cop Webster allegedly assaulted, was equipped with a helmet, a shield, a gas mask, and a full complement of body armor. Protesters who did not attend the protest with a mask or face shield are observed suffering the effects of being gassed and pepper sprayed by police. Officer NR can also be observed mocking several protesters who were complaining about this officer's excessive use of force. The video depicts this officer reaching beyond metal barriers and pushing Webster in the chest. It is at this point that Officer NR again reaches over the metal barricade and punches Webster on the left side of his face. Webster's attorney will use 12 minutes of the D.C. police officer's body-worn camera footage recorded before the confrontation to show his repeated use of excessive force. And it isn't just testimony and video the Justice Department wants to hide from both defendants and the American people. Prosecutors want the names of police officers allegedly attacked by Capitol protesters to remain anonymous. In the case of Victoria White, the female Trump supporter brutally beaten by 2 police officers from D.C. on January 6, Ms. Kelly told the story of her terrifying experience in 2 articles previously. The Justice Department claims the cops, not those assaulted by police, are the victims. As these officers now or in the future may qualify as victims under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, they have the right to be reasonably protected from the accused and the right to be treated with fairness and with respect of the victim's dignity and privacy. This is absurd, and it's an absurd caveat. And by the way, it's contained in the same motion that disclosed several defense attorneys have requested use of force investigation files of D.C. Metropolitan Police officers. It's important to note that 3 D.C. Metro police officers reportedly have committed suicide since January 6th. Ponder for a moment how that tactic would be immediately denounced on any other occasion of excessive force against political protesters. But since Trump and his supporters are considered subhuman by the Biden regime, Democrats, plenty of Republican lawmakers, and the national news media, the usual rules don't apply. Kelly continues her report. Meanwhile, a federal judge will soon rule on a motion filed by another January 6 defense attorney, subsequently supported by a group of 16 major news organizations, to remove the government's protective order on 3 hours of surveillance video from the Lower West Terrace Tunnel. That was the location of fierce fighting between police and protesters in the spot where Ms. Roseanne Boyland, who we've talked about here and Ms. Kelly has reported on, a Trump supporter from Georgia, died. Prosecutors are expected to oppose its release. As the January 6th House Select Committee accelerates its illegitimate legal pursuit of Trump and his associates under the guise of revealing the truth about the Capitol protests, the Justice Department is actively concealing the truth, especially related to police brutality that day. The only question now is whether federal judges in Washington will continue to allow the Biden regime to get away with it, harming our American system of justice and government.